Champions. I'm Amy Morgan, the feature writer for the Marriage Initiative, and I'm so delighted to introduce Eric Wooten today. Eric's an author and speaker in the North Texas area. He pastored churches in Texas for 15 years. Then his passion to help couples with their relationships led him to launch Altered Marriage with his wife of 27 years, Jill. Eric earned a Master's of Marriage and Family Counseling degree from Southwestern Baptist Theological Seminary and is a licensed professional counselor. He formerly served as a pastor of couples and counseling at One Community Church in Plano before launching Altered Marriage in 2020. Eric published The Magnetic Marriage, 8 Characteristics of Irresistible Marriages in 2019 and has recently released the book Relationshots, a practical guide to relationship success. Altered Marriage offers online resources, videos, a membership community of like-minded believers, and getaway retreats. Eric, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you for that really long intro. I always say that when people need no intro, that's when you've made it, right? You just say, "Hey, it's Bono, everybody," and they don't need anything else. So, but thank you. Good to be here.
Well, we like to introduce our speakers to our marriage champions because you don't care about what they're talking about until you know that they care and who they are. And
right, sure.
So now people can feel like they know you and what you do. But anyway, hey, you took a real step of faith to, walk away from a staff position and start a ministry. Little did you know that a few weeks later that we were going to have a worldwide pandemic.
Yeah, right.
Tell me how you got started. How did Altered Marriage get started?
Yeah, it kind of, definitely not the guy that you want for timing. It's something that's kind of always been there. And, we felt like God had given us a passion for marriages and to help people strengthen premarital and marriage. And so just kind of was really trying, and this is sad to say, was really trying to find the right timing, right? To, when's the time to kind of go ahead and finally do this. And so it'd been, something in our minds and hearts for probably 7-8 years, and just felt like this was a good season to go ahead and just go all in.
Well, and you spell the name of your ministry Altered as on the altar, altered.
Yeah.
So tell us why, because that's, being a writer myself, that I immediately noticed. I was like, wait, my spell check keeps saying that's
right. Yeah. It likes to correct it, but no, some of it was just, hey, you're trying to come up with a name that nobody else has used yet, right? And so part of it was it's just, catchy. People think of a wedding altar. But I think the deeper meaning, for us was also just the reality of what an altar represents. And I think a lot of times, couples show up on their wedding day excited and thinking about, this life partner they're about to get and all the things they're getting when, traditionally the altar was a place you came to give, to sacrifice, to give your best, as a place of submission and service and surrender. And so for me, it was just kind of having that reminder too, that we need to continually, daily remember the vows we made at that altar, and hopefully have a mindset that, I think if you have a mindset of what you're getting in relationship, right, that's going to drive you to do whatever you need to get what you think you need, right? You're going to control and manipulate and punish and withdraw. But if you look at your marriage as somewhere you came to give, I think now it becomes a ministry. So that was kind of the meaning behind the meaning.
Well, I thought that was definitely worth sharing with our marriage champions, because as they're thinking, of their own couples or mentoring and, steps into ministry, I wanted them to hear your heart behind kind of your philosophy. And that kind of goes into, you do have a philosophy of the things that you talk about, all that information that you, through your degree and through your years of working with couples, that you've kind of synthesized. You have kind of a weed and feed philosophy. Will you share that with us?
Yeah, this is where you figure out how super non-complicated I am, right? I think that marriage or relationship is simple. It's not easy, right? We all got our stuff, but it's pretty basic. It's like a plant. You gotta feed it the things that will help it to grow, the water, the fertilizer, i.e., and then you got to weed, which is remove the things that hinder growth or cause disconnection, right? And so I just think it's a constant process, and that looks different in every season. of marriage, but it's just a constant process of we got to be, doing the things that help us feel cared for and loved and connected, and at the same time we got to remove some of the behaviors and habits and patterns that cause disconnection and conflict and pain and hurt. And it's just never ending. You don't feed for a little while and then just coast. And obviously, if you only feed and never weed, that's going to continue to choke out the growth. So yeah, I think it's a simple intentional process of weeding and feeding.
Well, you use the word intentional. And that is one of your tenets, one of the things that you really talk about, one of your three pillars of things. So intentionality, that's a big one for
Yeah.
you. And then you have a couple others, personal responsibility, community. How about you unpack some of that for us? You laid it out very nice. I'm going to give a big plug. Here's your book.
There's my book with all the stickies in it. There you go.
Yes, I love to do that. And that shows it's a good one because I found lots and lots of really practical things that a marriage champion could use not only to strengthen their own marriage, but as a mentor and as a counsel. Um, in fact, why don't we just tell a little bit about how a marriage champion could use this book? Because you offer some suggestions. Tell a little bit about how it's set up.
Yeah, it's just really just 52, I'd say 52 weeks of intentional growth for couples. And so there's 52 chapters. They're all pretty small and pretty simple. It's a concept to kind of go through. And so 3 to 4 pages and then some questions for couples. And then we've got QR codes in there that take you back to YouTube. I have a YouTube channel of the same name. And so there's a video you can watch if you want. And so, yeah, there's I know counselors who, have their couples watch the videos, use some of the questions. So yeah, it could be used in a small group setting. Could you be used for couples who just want to be intentional and work on their marriage week after week? So just a practical guide.
Well, and at the end too, you have the chapters grouped according to topics, which I thought was really helpful too. So because you have several on one of your big themes that we're going to talk about later, but you have some that are about intentionality, some that are about community, and so if there's something in particular that a couple's looking at noticing is like a hot button or looking to shore up, they could go, oh, okay, well there's three about this one. Let's do that. And I love that. I'm going to just see if the camera will pick this up. Well, you can't see it very well, but see your take action, your QR code. So it's more than just a book with information. It really is a resource because it connects to your YouTube videos, and you have YouTube videos on your that was one of the things that helped you launch your ministry during the pandemic, right?
Yeah, we all pretty quickly had to get digital, right? And
Yeah.
so that was just a way to continue to get content out, and really for me, self accountability to, hey, I'm going to commit to doing something every week and stay with it. So it was both to provide some useful tools and keep myself accountable to continue to create content.
Yeah. And then as a resource that really augments just the what's in the book. It leads back to a whole lot more that a marriage champion could really use to dive deep. But let's talk a little bit about that. Let's talk about intentionality first.
Yeah. So as you mentioned, I think for me, kind of the three pillars of healthy marriage is intentionality, community, and personal responsibility. And so the idea behind intentionality is, that's nothing new. But I think our world has sold us a bill of goods when it comes to relationship and the idea that, healthy, wonderful, amazing relationships are just organically and spontaneously fantastic. And so we just assume that, that if something is good, it's just going to happen in a relationship. And I find the opposite to be true. And so I just believe strongly in couples being real intentional about everything. When do they have the kind of business discussions in marriage? Because that's a part of it, especially if you're raising kids, right? I mean, you got employees, so to speak, you got assets to manage, you got bills to pay. And so what I found is if you're not real intentional with when you do what types of things in the relationship, the business side will take over the entire relationship. And pretty soon, even date night is a conversation over dinner about the kids and the budget. And so I think we need to be real intentional about when we have business conversations, and we need to be real intentional about when this is strictly for us to connect. And we're not going to allow any topics to creep in that may cause conflict, or we know our tension points, right? And because the point of tonight is for us just to connect and enjoy time together. And so I just think a lot of couples have bought into the myth that, well, if we had a good relationship, wouldn't have to work so hard, it would just spontaneously happen. And so whether it's communication, whether it's sex, whether it's dates, whatever it is, if you think it's important for the relationship and it is not happening organically, put it on the calendar and be intentional.
And you actually had to like do a business meeting once a week, do a date night once a week, and then you had another component as well. What's it?
Yeah, I just called them quick connections. And again, we're weeding and feeding, right? And so I would rather us have more moments of fun and connection than we do of conflict resolution, problem solving. That's why I said one staff meeting for that kind of stuff, one date night, and then a couple quick connections is just, hey, 15, 20, 30 minutes, whatever a couple has time for. What helps you be connected? For some couples, it's doing a devotional. For another couple, it's playing a game, doing a puzzle, watching a favorite TV show, sharing their high and low for the day, whatever it might be. But just taking the time to be real intentional and say, hey, for the next 30 minutes, we're just going to put our phones down. We're going to put the kids to bed, whatever the distractions are, and just spend some time connecting.
Yeah, I like to put the phones down. And you even, in each chapter, you give examples of things, and you even, transparently set a time when you were talking to your wife and you didn't put your phone down. And she
Absolutely.
wasn't real happy about that. And I think every couple has had that conversation more than once.
Sure. Yeah, I'm busy. I wasn't in the mood to get interrupted, right? So yeah, I
Yeah.
didn't look up.
Yeah, yes. And you even had a really interesting concept at the end about bids, about
Yeah.
how something that you said is that when a couple is, is moving in the right direction, they're understanding each other's, they're leaning toward each other. Could you explain that a little?
Yeah, that's really John Gottman's, John and Julie Gottman, the Love Lab in Seattle. But John Gottman, he calls it leaning towards. And so it's just really that daily we make bids to each other for connection. It may be a little comment. It may be, hey, look at the weather. It may be, hey, did you see this article? And so the couples that are successful are the ones that respond to those bids for connection. And so, oftentimes we can ignore them. And so it's really about just trying to recognize when your spouse is making a bid to connect and making sure you're either leaning towards or leaning away from your relationship. And so the couples that succeed are the ones that lean towards.
And that is such a simple concept. But yet, how often is someone just looking at something on their phone or the TV or something else, and they have that choice right there in that split second? They may not even realize that their spouse is saying, hey, I'd like to engage with you about anything and this is their bid. This is their opening gambit. And you either can pick up intentionally on it with intentionality, like you say,
yeah,
or not. And how that's such an easy first step.
Yeah, and I don't do it very well often, so I could probably count a number of times my wife will say something and I won't respond, and her next comment will be like, "Oh, that was great having a conversation with you," right? And then you realize, okay, so yeah, I mean, it's one of those things that also over time, if we don't respond to one another's bids, we'll stop bidding. And that's not what we're looking for in the relationship, where there's just no more attempts, because we don't like rejection. And so if I feel like I continually bid with no response, at some point I'm going to quit bidding, and that's not a recipe for a good relationship.
No. And that too, when you're talking about the schedule, you actually even had some really good reasons why you should schedule sex. It sounds so unspontaneous, and why would we need to do that? But anyone who's been married for any length of time and throw in a couple babies and toddlers knows that there's probably a good reason to do that sometimes. It just doesn't sound very romantic, but it really can be. So you had some good reasons for that.
Yeah, but I think we've bought into, Hollywood and the myth of, it's got to be spontaneous, romantic. And like you say, when you've got kids, when you've got jobs, you have different sex drives. If it's happening organically, don't mess with it, right? That's great. But if it's not happening, to the level of satisfaction for the couple, schedule it. And, some people will say, oh, that's mechanical and then that's too planned. And my argument back is always, listen, if you got a favorite restaurant, and you schedule a reservation for Friday night at 7, the food is not worse when you get there. It doesn't taste differently than it's not like that food is better if you just decide at the last minute to go get it. And oftentimes it increases anticipation, right? It's like, hey, my favorite restaurant's on Friday night. We're going. I already know what I love there. I'm ready to eat it. I'm thinking about it. And so I just think it can eliminate a lot of the issues that couples have, from, discrepancy desires, to, sexual rejection, people feeling bad about that. And, the conversation that a lot of couples are having in their head, but not out loud and I'll just generalize because it's not always the wife with the lower desire, but the wife's laying in bed, doesn't feel like having sex. Husband's climbing into bed. Wife's secretly hoping in her head that husband doesn't try to initiate because she's not in the mood, may even act like she's asleep. Husband gets in. He's thinking, I wonder if she'd reject me if I initiate because I really want to, but I don't know because last time it didn't go well. And, God forbid her foot bumps his and he's like, oh, is that it? Is that an open door? Yeah, right. And so you just, you got couples just having these non-spoken conversations about it. And what scheduled sex does is eliminate a lot of that. There's no risk of rejection because we've already decided when we're going to do it. And, if somebody isn't feeling well, that's fine. Then, preemptive rejection. Hey, I know tonight's the night we had planned, but I'm not feeling good. Can we bump till tomorrow or something like that? So there's just a lot of reasons for couples, and it may not be forever. It may be the season you're in. And oftentimes scheduled sex begets more spontaneous sex. But I just think for people to say that's not on the table and there's no way we're going to do it, good luck.
Let's talk about that. You use 2 words to describe that, about you're having a gap between 2 people, and maybe we don't have to always meet exactly in the middle.
Yeah. So I think, one of the issues I see that a lot of couples struggle with is just managing those differences. And the false belief I'd say a lot of couples have is we've got to find some meet in the middle 50-50 solution for every area of difference. And I think for a lot of couples, most issues are unresolvable. And so what I encourage couples to do is what you were saying, is close the gap, right? We may not meet 50-50 in the middle, but how do I step towards you and how do you step towards me in this area so that we close the gap? And the smaller the gap, the obviously less availability there is for, miscommunication, conflict, frustration. And so for a lot of couples, that means there's a lot of areas in the relationship and where they're going to need to figure out ways to close the gap of their biggest differences that are causing the problems.
Can you give some examples? I know that there are a number of things, but just help us paint a little bit of a picture about where some places where couples would see differences that really are not going to get resolved.
Yeah. And again, there's probably hundreds of them, but everything from punctuality, right? That's an issue for a lot of couples. Neatness and organization. You've got, introvert, extrovert. You've got sleep routines, who goes to bed late, who likes to get up early, financial stuff, parenting stuff. I mean, time together versus time apart. Some people love connection, always want to be together. Other people need that independence and that space. So, I mean, there's just on and on and on these areas that can cause problems. And we got to figure out, how to close those gaps.
Could you give an example of a way a couple could each take a step toward each other? And just because I think, again, too, once you kind of make it a story, we can see it better.
Yeah. So imagine, like, let's take one, maybe need for adventure and getting out and doing stuff, and somebody who doesn't need that as much. Maybe somebody loves going camping and getting out in the woods. The other person loves the city. And, that becomes a constant fight. So I think if you're going to close the gap, what it looks like is the person who doesn't necessarily love adventure and getting out, when they see their partner kind of get into a place of like, they need that, right? They're fidgety. They want to get away. They'll kind of take one for the team and say, hey, why don't we go camping this weekend? I know you'd really like that. And then vice versa. If the person who loves adventure and being out is seeing that, their spouse is tired, overwhelmed, just really wants to be back at home relaxing, they may say, hey, you know what, why don't we stay home this weekend? Or, you know what, I'm going to go by myself, and I'll take the kids, right? So you can have some time at home. And so it's just recognizing what the other person desires and trying to move towards it. Same thing with sleep routines, right? If we don't have time together, and I like to go to bed early because I like to get up early, and you like to stay late, but we're never finding time together. I may find, hey, what's a night or two a week when I can stay up a bit later, just so we have some time. And will that affect my morning routine? Sure. Maybe I miss the gym, or I miss whatever I like to do. But on behalf of the relationship, I'm saying, hey, you know what? I'm gonna move towards you in this area.
Yeah. And then maybe the wife can say, hey, I can get up a little earlier. I'm just assuming the wife, because my husband's one who likes to go to bed early and I'm the one who stays up later. But maybe the other one says, I can get up with you early for this thing then
Yeah.
this time
Yeah.
too.
And
And kind
so
of, no,
they're managing the differences for them. And I think, for me, a lot of my frustration early in our marriage, when I'd go to conferences or read books, or I'd see these prescriptions that worked for other couples, that they kind of would say, hey, me and my husband grab coffee and do a devotional every morning and have for 20 years. And that's, our recipe for success. I hate the mornings. Like, I'm not talkative in the morning. Me trying to get up and have a devotional and talk with my wife would not go well.
yeah.
And so that doesn't work for us. But what does work for us? And I think it's figuring those rhythms out.
Yeah. I just thought that made such sense because in the book you return to that concept several different chapters and just kind of unpack it in different ways, that because sometimes couples they feel like they have to resolve some of these issues, and that you say, you know what, you don't.
Hmm.
They're not resolvable. So stop beating yourself up.
Yeah. And that's a lot of wasted energy trying to resolve an unresolvable problem, right? When we can just figure out some ways to manage it so it's not causing the friction that it used to.
Yeah. And that was the word I was looking for, was accept. You said accept that your spouse is perhaps messier than you are. And
Yeah.
accept that, and don't try to change, don't try to criticize. Because what did you say about criticism?
Well, criticism's going to kill any relationship, right? I mean, that's one of the big relationship killers. And so that's a perfect, that the tidiness, neatness is a perfect example. The tidy person may want the whole house tidy, and the non-tidy person feels like that's too much or too much work, but can say, hey, you know what, if I were to try to keep 1 to 2 rooms clean, what would be most important? Would it be, no dishes in the kitchen when you got home, or no stuff in the living room because that makes you feel cluttered? But to expect them to be able to manage that across the whole household's probably not realistic, and is a fight that would never end.
Yeah. And doesn't really need to be had.
No, it's like, if they're willing to step towards you and make some adjustments, we have to value that. And we got to celebrate the fact that they're making some effort here.
Yeah, I just love that. I think that is something huge, and not just in your book, but in the way the whole everything you espouse at Altered Marriage, whether it be the book, whether it be your YouTube videos, whether it be the counseling that you do online, your community, everything that you do. I just thought that was a really important takeaway. You do talk about some other things. You talk about personal responsibility, and that being a big tenet. Look, can we unpack that a little bit?
Yeah, it's just the idea that I think we have a responsibility in marriage. I think we have a relational responsibility, which is, what does my wife need to, this is where love languages or emotional needs, or, what does my wife need to feel connected and cared for and supported and secure, and have a responsibility to her for those things. But I also have a personal responsibility to the marriage, which is I need to deal with my own stuff. And so if that's, childhood wounds, trauma, past relationship stuff, if that's mental health issues, if that's emotional stuff, if I don't deal with those things, they're going to impact the relationship in a negative way, right? If I've not healed some of those areas, it now prevents me from relating in a healthy way with my spouse. And what I find with a lot of couples, especially in counseling, is that it's often a personal issue more than it is a relational issue. The relationship is exasperating or exposing the personal issue. But, if I have abandonment and rejection issues from childhood or past relationships, it's going to put my wife in a position where she really can't offer any constructive feedback. She can't call me out and hold me accountable, because every time she does, my response is exasperated, because, I can't handle it. Feels like rejection to me. It feels like you're abandoning me. You're not for me. And so I just think we have a personal responsibility to, when those things arise, to deal with them. Some of us know about it coming into marriage. And then I think there's other things that a marriage relationship or parenting or financial struggle or loss of a loved one bring out of us that we didn't know was there. Like, hey, I didn't see this 15 years ago, but now 22 years into marriage, I'm noticing, this pattern that's really hurting us. And so I think we have a personal responsibility. If that's counseling, if that's, getting a good mentor, but saying, hey, I recognize there's something in me that gets triggered by some things in you, and I need to process and heal those.
In fact, you said that that's often really what breaks down the marriage. It's not the relationship problem. It's somebody's untended to stuff that causes the breakdown. And
Absolutely.
I thought it was really interesting too. You said it'll even trump everything they believe in. If their wound, the triggering of their wound will trump everything they believe, their spirituality, their faith, their theology. It will come first eventually.
Yeah, sadly, I have found that our pain, our pain areas often, will trump what we say we believe in moments. And so I don't know if I have it in that book or not, but I talk about, three types of beliefs: taught, caught, and bought. And so taught and caught reside at the head level, and bought beliefs are more heart level things that have, been born out of moments of pain. And so what we do find is that the bought beliefs will usually trump a head belief. So you can say, that for instance, you grow up in a family, and you're taught God's good, he loves you, he won't leave you or forsake you. You see it modeled. Parents are trusting him and tithing and stewarding things well, and believing in God. And, somebody is sexually abused, or parents divorce, or, a painful experience happens. And in that moment, you can buy the belief that, God didn't love me. He did forsake me. He was not there for me. I cannot trust in him. Maybe can't trust in family or parents either. And then just see those, those bought beliefs throughout life, if not dealt with. When we hit relational issues, those beliefs are going to rise up and cause us, even though we said we've committed to marriage, and we believe marriage is a lifelong covenant, and we believe God will give us all the tools to get through it, and all these other things. In those moments of pain, you just kind of go, man, I can't do this. This will never get better. There's no hope here. And so we bow out.
Yeah. But there doesn't have to be like that.
No.
If you work on your baggage,
Absolutely.
then you can come healthy. And that was a great. And then another of the things that you talked about was community. That's something that is so important. Talk a little bit about that, and then I want us to make sure that we talk about the community you offer through Altered Marriage.
Sure. Yeah. No, I'm if someone, puts me at the edge of a bridge, or tells me to walk the plank, and says, you get to pick one thing that's important for marriage, what is it? I'm gonna go community every time. I believe relationships, marriage specifically, is a group project. I don't believe it was meant to be done alone. I don't think it can be done very well alone. And so I just think we all need community, which is when I say, let me distinguish this. When I say community, I mean authentic, real conversations, transparent. We're being honest with each other. We're supporting each other, because there's a big difference between what I would call camaraderie and community. Camaraderie is cool. You got your friends, you go out to eat and you vacation together, but you really don't talk about what's going on in your relationship at any level of depth. That's not community to me. Community is we are doing life together. We are sharing our highs and lows together. We're supporting each other. We're fighting for each other. Every wedding I do a challenge to everybody in the audience before I start charging up the bride and groom. And I just basically say, all of you have influence in their lives. And my challenge is you would always use it to fight for their marriage and never use it to pull them apart. And I just think for me, if I show up at a wedding, like I'm in your marriage now. I'm gonna show up in your garage at 11:30 at night if I know things aren't going well and you're trying to quit. Like I'm part of your marriage. I didn't just come to get cake and have a free meal and clap and dance a little bit. And so I just think we need community at times for encouragement, for support. If you know believe that your spouse will always be your greatest supporter, just wait till they're mad at you, and they're probably not. And so there will be seasons when you need some outside support that you're not getting at home. There will be seasons when you need encouragement, when you need hope for your relationship that you don't have. And then I think accountability. If you are your spouse's only accountability partner, I think you're setting yourself up for a really tough relationship, because if they don't feel like being held accountable by you, what are you going to do? And this is, you know, every counselor can amen this one, that you've been in the office with one spouse who is trying to work on their marriage, but the other spouse is not interested and doesn't want to be there and doesn't want to fight for it. And my question is always, who has relational leverage in your spouse's life that we can help call them into account with? And oftentimes the answer is nobody. And that's just not healthy. So part of my wife's security in our marriage is not just the hope that Eric's going to make the right decision, or Eric's going to lean on his faith and listen to the Holy Spirit's conviction, but also the backup security is, if I start acting a fool and I don't want to be accountable to her, and I don't want to do the things that I committed and was supposed to do in the relationship, she's got a handful of guys that she can call and she can say, here's what's going on, go get Eric. And I just know if those guys call me and say, hey man, heard things are difficult, let's have lunch, welcome to community. You know, this is this. So I think it provides security. I think it provides support, encouragement, a lot of the things that we need to make a marriage work. And couples who are not in community, I think, are in a dangerous place.
Well, and you offer, because the first thing people are our marriage champions are probably thinking, well, how do I find that? You offer a solution to that. So let's talk about your community membership.
Yeah. So there's a lot of, you know, obviously being on staff at church for a lot of years, a lot of churches at this point have small groups and couples groups. And I think those are huge, you know, to being a part of a couple small group. But part for me when I launched out was, how do I create community? You know, how do I do? And I think that was the positive side of the pandemic, and me launching when I did was, it forced me to go, what does it look like to create digital community? So for couples who may not have a church they're plugged into, or maybe their church doesn't have something that can support relationships, or maybe they don't feel comfortable at their church sharing what's really going on. And so one of the things we do is a marriage membership community that's got a nominal monthly fee for couples, and it provides just access to, we continue to add video resources and worksheets and all kinds of stuff that couples can do on their own. But then we also have a platform where we have spaces for couples to engage and interact. So we do a challenge every month and try to encourage couples to do the challenge and post pictures and share wins. And so you can ask questions. And then we've got separate spaces for husbands and wives. So the wives can just talk to the wives and get support, husbands with husbands. And then we do some live Zoom calls every month. I do a couples call, a men's call. I've got another gal that does a call just for the ladies. And so we're just trying to create some digital community for people who don't have it to support.
And you have another physical way too, right? You take couples every now and then on an experience getaway.
Yeah. And again, this for me comes back to community. And so we do, you know, last year I did a couple in Cancun. This year we're going to do Dominican Republic and maybe Cancun again. And so just taking 8 to 10 couples, I call it the Altar Marriage Experience. And so we get away for, you know, 4 nights, 5 days, and have some moments of fun, but also some, you know, moments of semi intense, depending on who you are. Talk about where we're at in our relationship and how to strengthen and grow the relationship. And so I just find getting away from home is, you know, one thing to remove distractions, and then having a group of couples who are kind of in this together, and just that shared experience creates lifelong friendships. And I always tell the couples, I say, you probably learn more for the people sitting next to you than you are from me this weekend, because that cross sharing and, you know, counseling terms is called universality. But when you realize you're not the only one dealing with what you're dealing with, and you see that other couples are just like you, there's something encouraging and hope filling about that. And so really love doing those experiences as well.
Well, they sound like a lot of fun. And Eric, speaking of fun, it has been so fun talking to you.
Yeah,
Thank you so much for being here.
absolutely. Thank you for having me. You know me, I'm always game to talk about relationships. So
Wow, we are so glad that you did. And as always, Marriage Champions, if you'd like to learn more about Eric and altered marriage, you can find us at marriageinitiative.org.